So we're now going to welcome to the stage Caroline Reynolds, who's our Director of Performance Media Products. Caroline's going to be talking to us a bit more about how we've taken that machine learning piece on a bit to sort of affect the kind of work that we perhaps do as a on a more of a day-to-day basis and apply that to kind of biddable media and how we can use machine learning to drive better performance. So over to Caroline.
Thank you. So I have to say a big thank you to Sophie and Rahul because they've done all the hard work for me. They've spoken a lot about data and how important that is, and Rahul has taken you through some of the great tools that we use. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of theory, but then it's actually going to be a number of kind of case studies and some use cases and how we're thinking about it in iProspect. So where to start? So some big numbers, first of all. Some good old Forrester data, which is looking at, I think every single marketer and probably most people in this room, hence why we're all here today, are excited about machine learning. We know it's going to be important. And actually from our iProspect data, which was in the Future Focus report, the number one priority and the things that we're thinking about, and it sounds like you're thinking about, is how we use data, machine learning, and other tactics to really personalize and hone that consumer experience, which is good because I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. But a number of people aren't using that, and I think we've spoken already about where some of those challenges currently lie. But there is absolutely a gulf between people who are doing it today and those who are not. And that 1.7 megabytes of data per person per second that Forrester are forecasting by 2020 is truly terrifying, because if we stay where we are, that gulf is only going to increase across marketers. So what does that mean from our point of view and how we're thinking about it? I think Pete put up a slide earlier which said 38% of jobs are potentially going to be redundant by 2038. There's a nice picture of Christie up there, but also I quite like this quote because it talks about the role that machine learning has for us today is not about fundamentally changing what we do. It's about enabling us to enhance what we're currently doing today. And the way that we're thinking about that is really across two distinct areas. So first of all, kind of improving that user experience through absolutely personalization, but also through kind of increasingly conversational methods. And we'll touch a little bit more on chatbots later on. And then the second piece, which absolutely builds from customer experience and all those audience signals that we've started to talk about already, but how do we go beyond audience and how do we look at performance marketing data and look to go really deep within that so that we can predict and manage complexity because there is an awful lot of that data, and how can we uncover relationships within that performance marketing data that we just may not have been aware of and actually make it actionable so that we can drive some business performance at the other end. So starting off with the user experience, clearly there is a clear commercial and customer benefit to doing that, and we've spoken a little bit about that already. So Amazon, for example, who are going to be speaking later on, they may as well be referred to as a data science company these days. A lot of their business is built on this deep recommendation engine. And actually, looking at some stats before I stood up today, McKinsey are calling out that it may be up to 60% of the recommendations that Amazon put in front of us that we actually convert on. So that is a clear commercial benefit. We've spoken a little bit about the Netflix of Africa. So Netflix, another great company who really leverage all of that data to drive recommendations of their own. And I don't know if anybody knows the amount of content that is consumed on Netflix due to their recommendation engine. Any guesses? Thought we might be quiet. So it's 70%, which is obviously overwhelming. And there is a 19-page report online, if you are stuck for reading on the way home, where some of the Netflix executives have called out that they're saving $1 billion, and it was dollars, a year in terms of their recommendations, just through, obviously, their customers not lapsing and staying with their content. So clearly there is a clear commercial and consumer need. And if we're to kind of create a similar recommendation engine, and Rahul has started to build on these points already, but if we're going to do that within media, it absolutely starts with the data. So what is that audience segmentation that we can get hold of? And we may well already have a great deal of that today. But going one step further, and I think the Mercedes-Benz is a really nice example of that, what are those journey steps and how can we use advanced attribution and analytics to really understand each point within the journey? And I'll come on to this a little bit later, but how do we actually take the benefits of conversation and machine learning and chatbots, etc., so that we can build that richer picture. And if we get all that data stuff right, it really informs three things for us from a media perspective. So A, what the interaction value is. So should we converse with that user at that moment in time? If so, what creative and message should we show? And then what is that onward experience? So that may be website. So what is that content that we want to drive that person to? And again, and Rahul's kind of mentioned this, like it's increasingly exciting because not only are we getting our data in order, but there are a number of things that we can do today that technology is enabling us to actually activate this within real time. And actually, a lot of your media today is probably already working this way. So if we think about just paid search, if you're running smart bidding within the AdWords ecosystem, that is already pulling out so many different signals at the moment that we're appearing on a keyword and bidding. So geo signals, time of day, Google is already applying its vast kind of deep learning experience to make sure that we're bidding in the right way for those keywords. But how can we go one step further? And a little bit later on, I'll take you through our approach to it and some of the tools and systems that we're building to enable us to capture that. So, I'm going to kick off with perhaps the easiest one because we've spoken a little bit about it already. But starting with that message, so dynamic creative optimization. It's fairly well used across the industry. I'm sure there's a number of people in the room today who are already using it. But using that deep kind of audience data that we may well be using and segmenting, if we can build in those journey moments at the same time, that gives us a much richer predictive engine. And when I say journey moments, I'm not just talking about the different steps on the journey. It may as well be including search data. So what is the keyword that they may have searched before we're about to show them an ad? So actually building a larger predictive engine, leveraging the same dynamic creative optimization technology that we currently do today. And then at the other side, really analyzing that creative analysis. And I was going to talk a little bit about image recognition, but you've done that for me, so thank you. And if we can start to tie all this together, so understand images and what is working and what is powering performance, and feed that back into the predictive engine, this is where we start to really close the loop. But beyond just engaging with the consumer in the moment and thinking a little bit more about what we want to do after they've reached our website or the content that we want to share with them, I just wanted to talk a little bit about where we are with personalising content. So I like this slide because I think it spells out quite clearly the approach, the machine learning approach and the models that we use. So I'm going to talk a little bit about an example that we've just worked through for an insurer brand that we work with. And they came to us to say, right, we want to create some content. It was a very standard brief. They wanted to engage people who were coming to their site. And we said, okay, that's great. However, can we do something a little bit different this time around? And can we start to work with this vast amount of customer data that you already house to enable us to cross-sell better to new customers? So we looked at a machine learning algorithm. We applied it, obviously, through their systems. So we created the model, we trained the model. And then as new customers were coming to site, we would ask the model to kind of run and predict what content would best be served. So if it was a female coming to site who was going to Spain, who was perhaps 25 years old, the content that we were serving was radically different to, say, a male going on a ski trip who's 18 years old. And that was all driven in real time, and it was driven through their existing customer behaviour and insight. So I think that is quite fascinating. And also the idea that we were starting to ask these new consumers at the point that they arrived to try and really understand what content to serve. And that idea of asking the consumer, I think, is going to become increasingly more powerful, like this year and into next. So we've spoken a little bit about chatbots today. I wanted to look at this example for Diageo, which we've just gone live with a couple of weeks ago. And this is a chatbot that we activated for them for a whiskey campaign. So it was a relatively simple concept and actually really, really quite quick to create. And it starts with, and I won't go through the entire process, but it starts with the media driver. So we were driving media to this campaign. And it was a Facebook Messenger bot. So you would arrive at the bot, and the bot would say, hello, are you over 18? Yes, excellent, let's continue. And then it would ask a series of questions. So are you looking for a whiskey for yourself, or is this a gift? And then it got into a bit more depth, so beyond my comprehension, because I'm not a whiskey drinker. But do you prefer toffee flavours versus vanilla flavours? And then it would give you a series of recommendations. So this is quite a nice approach. It was really quick to walk through. And off the back of this campaign, we saw a 17% conversion to people going through to either find out more or to buy online. So that is quite a significantly improved engagement rate to other media activations that we typically see. What I would call out at this point as well is that chatbots for this sort of campaign activation are very different, and the rules that apply are very different to when we're thinking about creating skills, actions, and bots that live within our digital assistants. And we know there that there can be a real issue with utility. So I think there's a stat of around, I think it's about 11% of skills are loaded and actioned 2 weeks after they were first installed. So there is a real drop-off there in terms of retention. So I think if we're starting to play in that space, it really becomes about figuring out what that utility is going to be for the consumer. But this is quite a nice idea, and it also enabled Diageo to really understand more about the consumer, what their intention was, and to pull that through into new media activations. But it's not just about the kind of insights that we can take online and apply to offline. I think increasingly, like we're looking at this data, and we've already alluded to some really nice examples today, and thinking about how we can really transform omni-channel success. So I'm just going to touch a little bit on natural language processing. And again, like using an example that we've just walked through for an optician's client of ours. So same client, so 750 high street stores. And they came to us with a very distinct and narrow problem, which was that they really wanted to understand all this rich sentiment analysis that sat within this whole host of reviews within Trustpilot. So that is clearly unstructured data, because people will either write a sentence or they will write 3 paragraphs, maybe even 3 pages on the experience that they've had. So using BigQuery, as we've already walked through today, and natural language processing, which does what it says on the tin, it looks at a great deal of natural language and processes it. We were able to extract and scrape those Trustpilot reviews. And what we started to see was that from each review, we were able to call out the location, the people involved, so was it the optician, was it the staff, what the event was it an eye test, were they going there for a subscription, and generally what the sentiment was. So consumer good, contact lenses, excellent. So this enabled us to go a little bit further, and actually it goes beyond what we typically see from sentiment analysis, because we were able to uncover kind of the minutiae of these reviews. So within this is a generally positive review. So the eye test was excellent. There was a great selection of glasses, but the test room was cramped. So this is one very specific insight from one review. But you can imagine as we start to build this kind of structured insight to feed through to this optician client, they were then able to make that really actionable within their stores. So spoken a little bit about predicting and managing complexity. So we've covered creative optimization, content optimization, how we can activate campaigns in more of a meaningful way through AI, and then also omni-channel recommendations. But actually, like as performance marketers, there are so many more data signals that we need to look at. And this is where, going back to that media recommendation engine, we need to encompass much more. So typically, when we're activating campaigns on your behalf, we're looking at these different levers, and there are almost an infinite number of levers that we've got to pull at any one moment. So it may be who we deliver the experience to, so the audience, the location, the keyword, the context. It may be where we deliver that experience, so the channel, the placement, the device. It may be when, it may be what experience we deliver. So these are all the things that we're working through. And actually, that becomes impossible to do at scale. Like we've already seen with the amount of data that we need to be thinking about, even if we were to kind of employ a team of 100 people, we wouldn't be able to do that. So I'm now going to flick to a video. We wanted to introduce iProspect Core, which is our AI-powered optimization engine. So I'll let it run, and then we can talk through in a little bit more detail how we're using it. This should work.
iProspect Core is an AI-powered performance marketing engine capable of analyzing and optimizing all of your digital data signals across all of your channels all of the time. It uses machine learning to interpret your digital marketing data and then optimizes the activity based on your business metrics in real time. It delivers better results for less. So how does it work? iProspect Core works by seamlessly integrating technology, data, analytics, and activation. Log file performance data is ingested from ad-serving platforms such as DoubleClick Campaign Manager or web analytics platforms like Adobe or Google Analytics 360. The performance data is then cleansed, partitioned, and stored securely in the cloud on Amazon Web Services for efficiency and to enable scalability. Our customized machine learning algorithms access the log file data and process it at a rate of 6 billion data points per minute to determine the most effective set of optimization decisions. Optimization decisions are then pushed into all key activation platforms, including DoubleClick Search, Google AdWords, Bing Ads, DoubleClick Campaign Manager, DoubleClick Bid Manager, and Facebook Business Manager. iProspect Core delivers 6 key benefits: reduce time spent on repetitive performance marketing tasks, build attribution and predictive models in real time, increase number of optimization opportunities, increase frequency of optimization, improve quality of optimization decisions, and improve return on investment. iProspect Core. The future of performance marketing is here.
Excellent. So I wanted to take a little bit of a deeper look at Core. So not to rehash the video, but just to explain it in a little bit more depth. And this is our kind of advanced solution. So I mentioned that there's already a number of technology and tools that you will almost certainly be deploying today. But this is where we start to create more bespoke solutions for clients. So because it's AI and it's machine learning, it's obviously underpinned on data. We've spoken about that a lot today. So the first stage is really around data collection. And what we're concerned with here is any data that is going to impact performance. So we can start small. We can start with AdWords data, analytics data. We can start to do that by segmenting audiences, so Salesforce, other DMP platforms apply. So we collect all of that data, and we will work with any data storage solution needed. So that may be AWS, it may be GCP, it may be Azure. That isn't almost the important thing at this point. And what Core is then doing is it is looking at all of those different data points, and we've already seen today how BigQuery can mine and harness that data. And what Core will do is look at the relationship between those data signals. So it may be between AdWords and Adobe, but if we've also plugged in weather data, it will start to look at how weather data has an impact on our performance data and on our KPIs. And it will uncover those deep relationships, and it will then start to make plans and predictions around what media outputs and optimizations it should make to drive increased business performance. And the really nice thing for us about Core is that it's actually driven directly into your digital activation. So when Core is saying, let's bid up this CPC by 20%, it's actually making that change in AdWords for us in real time if needed. And then what happens is it will pull back the data. So it's obviously got that sync with AdWords, using that as an ongoing example. And it will pull back the performance data. And if it has not made those plans and the predictions, that is when the system will begin to learn. So that is kind of the machine learning element to it. So we're really excited about it. We have rolled this out for a few clients. We started testing it last year in about July time. This was the first 5 weeks of an activation for a travel client that we launched it on. And you can see, and some of the things I get excited about on here are things like pausing poor performing keywords and keyword bid management. But it's actually a lot of the tasks that our teams and our people are doing day to day on your behalf. And we're actually enabling Core to take over the management of that. So in week 1, we started with some keyword work. By the time we finished in week 5 of this first pilot, we were already starting to test ad copy and creative in real time and A/B testing. So the results that we saw were pretty standout, and this was a client that we've been working on for 2 years previously. So for us to see a 12% reduction in cost per click and ultimately a 30% reduction in CPA, we were pretty impressed with the results ourselves, as was the client. And the nice thing about this is this was the first example which was on search, but the roadmap in the next month or so is to go live on social and then move it out to programmatic. So you can see how we're starting to take that people-based approach and moving beyond just channel. And with that, I think my 7 key takeaways, just to build on what Sophie and Rahul have said. So absolutely don't forget about the data and infrastructure. I haven't dwelled on it too much because I think they did an excellent job setting it up. Start with a narrow business challenge. So many of the examples that we've kind of walked through, including that Specsavers opticians example around the sentiment analysis, that was quite a narrow challenge that they came to us with that we were able to expand on. But absolutely start to go broader with that customer data and leverage that to improve the experience for all. Conversation, I think, is going to become really, really important, whether that's on site, on Facebook, through Alexa, and harnessing that kind of question and answer conversational experience. Absolutely share wider, so we've talked a little bit about omnichannel. And then finally, it really is about technology. So there is technology that exists today that you will be using, but how do we think about future-proof solutions for tomorrow? That was it.
Thank you very much. So once again, we've got another opportunity to ask some questions for Caroline. Obviously, that's perhaps an area that most people in this room, I guess, would be reasonably familiar with. Biddable media is probably something that sits at the foundation of most people's digital communications, digital customer acquisition strategy. So I guess I would imagine there's probably a few people with a few thoughts on that. So if anybody's got a question, if you want to stick your hand up and we'll get the mic to you. Question at the back there?
Cool.
Yeah, we've got two. We'll get another one over here in a second, but brilliant.
I guess it's a question for all 3 presenters, really. We've talked about the benefits of machine learning from an agency perspective and a marketing perspective. But are we creating a monster? Are we essentially changing the way, through our data footprint as a consumer, the way in which we buy today and our prices we pay for tomorrow based on our data footprint? It's similar to a credit score. Will that then shape the way in which consumers buy and pay a price in the future? And how do we combat that if we're striving to take away the human interaction and driving machine learning?
So if I understand the question, so are you thinking from a consumer experience, harnessing mass data?
Yeah, so we're talking about this enhances the customer experience,
Yeah.
but is there also a risk that we could harm that customer experience for a certain number of users?
Yeah, I think, and I will let everyone jump in as well, but I think there is clearly this expectation economy. So I think, and all the research that we've seen points to the fact that consumers are relatively happy with handing over and their data being leveraged if it drives benefit for them. I think clearly, there is, and I think GDPR starts to cover this, there is really an onus and an expectation on us to be responsible with that data. I was chatting the other day to a potential client who was thinking around targeting people in the pregnancy moment and starting to think about some of the signals and the cues that we would want to potentially bring into our media activation to target them. And actually, you really do have to put that lens of kind of responsibility on, because clearly if we're starting to get into those sort of areas, it can be, it can be potentially quite dicey. So I think there is absolutely a role for responsibility. As I said, I think GDPR will start to cover that. But I think if we can do it in the right and responsible way, I think it's to the benefit.
Yeah.
You got anything to add?
Is there a question over here? There's a few. We've got a few. We'll get there. The mic is on its way around.
The iProspect Core product, so you've said you've been testing it a bit. I just wondered what level of manual checking and involvement was in it still.
Yeah.
Because you can't sort of let it run itself, surely.
Yeah.
And, so as a client, if that was, we chose to use it, what kind of comfort is there in that area?
Yeah. It's, we spoke, when we first went live with this last year, we spoke at great lengths to make sure that we had this right. And ultimately, absolutely for the first pilot, for that client and for the ones that we've run subsequently, we don't just hand over control at that moment. It becomes this rigorous, there is obviously a human layer. I think over time we will start to step away, but it's about us putting the right thresholds and alert mechanics into that system as well. So already we will work with a number of different rules. So taking search, for example, we can make sure that even if Core wants to accelerate the bidding by 300%, we can put some manual blocks and checks in place to say, actually, no, we only want to improve bidding by 5%, and make sure that we can even send kind of alerts through by text message or email. So there are a number of different factors that we can build into the system. But I think even with that in place, like, it is about human control as we let the system go live and we start to test it. Hopefully that answers the question.
Another question here? Oh, does it? Okay. Any more? One question I did have, I guess that's worth us covering in relation to this is, do you expect this will become the new reality? I guess, we talked before about 38% of jobs that we recognise in our economy not existing today. Obviously, the industry, the agency sector is as open to disruption as any other sector is. I guess, do we expect that these sort of biddable platforms or these biddable frameworks will be the new norm for us as an agency group in the future, that we'll be relying on technology to do what humans have done for some time?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is search marketer, as you might be able to tell, because I talk a lot about search. And I joined search about 10, 12 years ago, and my job has fundamentally changed over that period. And I think even when we take Core out of the mix and those sort of solutions, the roadmap that Google and some of the other technologies have that we work with today, it's phenomenal. And the amount that we're starting to automate through like double click for search, and then when we start overlaying things like Core on top of that, like clearly there is going to be more automation. I do think, though, to counter that, and we're already starting to see this within iProspect, we're moving from, yes, absolutely having specialists and teams who really understand search and biddable, but also having a data science layer. So within Sophie's team, she has a number of data science experts who sit and work on these sort of projects as well. So you can start to see that the shape of the teams is changing and the way that we're thinking is starting to change. So yes, I think it will change, but I think, as I said at the beginning, it's not about fundamentally changing, it's about enhancing and moving where we need to be able to capitalise on this.
Great, thank you. Time for one more, if there's anybody else who's got something that thought of. Oh, got one over here.
Hiya. I guess whenever anyone talks about data, the elephant in the room is GDPR. And given that I don't think anybody's quite got to grips with exactly what the implications are going to be, but everybody's aware of the importance of it. When we talk about putting multiple data sets together, making sure you've got the strategy right, what are the concerns or watch outs you would give to the people in this room around how they tackle that in the future, in an unknown future? And I guess especially when we've seen things like a rise in ad blocking and increasing awareness, obviously all the stuff that's over Channel 4 News and The Guardian around how data's used and the concerns about it. Would you have any advice or any tips that you would give to people if they're going to go down this data-led strategy or focus on it more? How would they navigate these complexities?
So I'll kick it off. Sophie is very much the expert on GDPR at our side, not handing it over to you. But first and foremost, so a lot of this data already exists, right? And you will be almost undoubtedly like leveraging it at the moment. And I think at the moment it's absolutely about making sure that we've got the right checks and balances in place and we've got the right permissions on that data. And I'm sure that is a process that you're looking at the moment, and we can certainly kind of follow up. But we've passing the buck. Do you want the mic?
Oh, I'm on, I think, yeah. Hooray.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk this way because the mic's there. 2 seconds. There we go. Let's try that. So consent is like the number one thing. I preface this with saying that I'm not a lawyer because I get very fired if I offer you legal advice. But in terms of, I guess, pointers, ensure that you have consent from your consumers. So you absolutely should not be consolidating data sets to be doing profiling if you do not have the consent of your consumers to do that. We get into the exciting realm of things like legitimate interest, which simplistically means if you have a reason why you need to contact your consumers, you don't necessarily need the same level of consent to do that. So for example, if you're changing interest rates in your bank, that's probably a legitimate reason to tell them. If you're a doctor and you need to ask them to come for an appointment, that's legitimate interest to go and talk to them. I spoke earlier about having the right infrastructure in place. And one of the, I guess, almost benefits of pooling your data is that if you do get a subject access request, all of your data is in one place, and it makes it easier to report, find, and respond to that subject access request. So I appreciate that's probably quite a woolly answer, but in terms of some like really practical steps, make sure you know where your data is, make sure you know what your consumers have agreed to, and make sure that you have the processes in place to respond to the unforeseen. You've absolutely hit the nail on the head. We don't really know what's coming. We have an idea. We have some legislation that, depending how depressed you're feeling when you read it, is either the end of the internet or is actually some really good structured approaches and ways of making sure we manage people's data effectively. So the best advice I can give you is to make sure that you have the process in place to respond when the legislation becomes clearer.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end. A round of applause for Caroline. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're going to have a coffee break now. We've got some coffee and refreshments, etc. Next door. So we'll pop off for about half an hour-ish and get back in here just after 3 o'clock. Before we all go, I did just want to make one announcement, was to say thank you very much to Google, who have kindly provided all of our refreshments today. So the coffees, the teas, the cakes, etc. you have now, and the lunch that you ate earlier was very kindly provided us by Google, so we're very thankful for that. But other than that, we've got 4 great talks for you in the second half. So if you all want to grab a coffee, and we'll see you back here in about half an hour. Thank you.